that being said, I'll turn it over to Erin.
Hi. So Holly, are you going to be controlling or do I have control?
I have control. So if you just want to let me know when to go to.
Okay. Yep. You can click. So this is just a bio, and Rick, you did a great job, and thank you guys so much for inviting me to join you all on your inaugural forum discussion. I only have about a dozen slides because I thought it might be useful to leave time at the end for us to sort of brainstorm on what you all might want to do next and how I or anyone at ACEC can help you. Besides my life with Dewberry and HOK, I also know exactly what you all are doing when you organize programs and organize ACEC at a state level or regional level, because I was the former programs chair and then president of CREW Northern Virginia, and CREW is Commercial Real Estate Women. So most of my career has been spent on the vertical side. I am an urban planner by education, and I also hold an MBA, but working for ACEC is my first time at working for an association. Before that, I was with AE and EA firms. So you can go to the next one. So this is just sort of a big picture. One of the things I found fascinating when I joined ACEC, as I think you all know, is people associate ACEC with transportation and water. And so I have a couple slides that sort of frame where construction money is spent so that we can sort of frame what the market and what the landscape really is. Because so for example, last year the construction put in place numbers, it was 1.3 trillion, and 522 billion was on residential projects, which of course is very important for our land development folks. And we do have a land development coalition at ACEC National, and some of our state MOs also have land development committees. I'm not sure if you guys do. And then 463 billion was spent on private sector projects and 322 on public. And the bar chart is just there to show you the last 5 years, which is pretty flat, honestly. We've had up until obviously a couple months ago, up until March, we had a continued economic growth for 11 years, I believe. And since coming out of the Great Recession. So who knows what 2020's bars will look like, but the point of this slide is really to reinforce that, there's so much more to what AE firms and what our members at ACEC are designing beyond transportation and water projects, although those are important too. So, and then the next slide is also numbers that we track that come from the federal government, from the Census Bureau. And these are just to show AE firm revenues. So this is US firms, and they've, just like construction spending, they've gone up. They're actually a little bit behind the construction spending, but they've gone up steadily since the Great Recession. And last year, about $350 billion were the revenues for AE firms. And, most of that is actually engineering, as you all are probably familiar with, over architecture. And then the next slide sort of drills down. So this is from ENR. And for those of you that follow when their top 500 list comes out, they do a nice job sort of segmenting the actual markets. And this is design work, not construction management or construction administration sort of work necessarily. But, of the revenues from the top 500 firms in ENR in the US, 63% goes to markets that are private. And as you guys can see from the bar chart, I don't know, those of you that see our faces on the right might not be able to see, but the bar to the right of transportation is buildings, coming in at 25%. So, for AE firms and EA firms, buildings are greater than transportation as a market share. And then on the next slide is sort of, again, that construction put in place number that shows where money is going in a given year when segmented by project type. So Transportation came in last year at 20%, and water, wastewater at 5%, but obviously most of these other categories are more vertical in nature, or certainly more private in nature. So office, which is separate from commercial, and healthcare, are on the left side of the chart. And then of course power, which is, generally considered a private client, but is obviously more horizontal than vertical in nature, is at 13%. And then the next slide. So when I joined ACEC about 2.5 years ago, people just kept saying private market, private market. And as you guys know, the private market is very large. And so, so I really wanted to drill down and to sort of categorize it a little bit so that we could sort of package it and analyze it in different ways. So, I met with a few key folks and we decided to move it into basically 4 buckets, or 4 broad market sectors that capture most of what the private market is for engineering firms. So on the next slide, you can see, and I always put, I'm a former business development director, so I am always thinking about the clients, but so I put on here the sort of client types and some examples of clients in each sector. So the first sector that I and we at ACEC are spending time analyzing is the commercial and residential real estate sector. So you all know that, clients in this type could be real estate developers, home builders, particularly for our land development folks, retail clients, and then I put, an example client listing to the right. Intermodal and logistics is another private sector sort of client. And this is really interesting because it's very much a growing market sector, even though it's transportation related. It is, especially given e-commerce and some of the trends of the last 5 or 10 years, it's become more significant. So ports and intermodal clients, railroads, class 1 railroads in the US are privately held. Logistics and freight delivery companies, companies like Amazon, FedEx, UPS, doing work at freight terminals, and on the land side has become increasingly important for a lot of our member firms. Thirdly, we have energy and utilities. So these are all sorts of, much of this work can be horizontal in nature, but it's very, very key, and it's generally very relationship based and falls in the private sector. Telecommunications is getting a lot of focus, as you guys may have heard with some of the infrastructure talk that's happening here in Washington, D.C. And I was telling Beth how I might form, a bit of a temporary or ad hoc telecom or broadband committee, within the next couple months as we sort of look at what is put forth in the stimulus that we hope is coming. So if any of you on the call do a lot of telecom or broadband or that kind of work, I would love to hear from you. And if you have any interest in sort of following along and giving advice on that market sector. And then lastly, we have healthcare and science and technology. And, this is a big market for a lot of firms. A lot of MEP firms, obviously specialize in doing healthcare and S&T work. When I worked at HOK, I worked very closely with our healthcare and S&T groups, which were very large. And so medical facilities, laboratories, and pharma. I put universities in this category because that's really the most specialized project type within universities, and data centers. And then on the next slide, this is a bit crowded, so I apologize, but, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time necessarily talking to this, but one of the things that we're really doing that helps to drive what I communicate out to members through the private industry briefs, and also in some of the program we do for our annual convention, our fall conference, and the webinars that we develop, is sort of trends by market. So, so each year I develop my top 4 or 5 trends by market sector. And so these are covered in the private industry briefs. And if you haven't checked those out, I'll show you where to grab those on the ACEC website. But, we are seeing a lot of trends, and they're going to change, as we sort of touched on in our discussion in the beginning, in the future due to this pandemic. And I think, a lot of that is sort of to be determined. We don't quite know how things are going to change, but, one example is, for example, in the commercial real estate market, do we have the appropriate HVAC, for example, to handle standards that may be coming as a result of us facing pandemics? Is there an opportunity for us to visit with our clients in that commercial real estate market and, tout our abilities to create, a contactless environment, for example, whether it's in bathrooms or elevators or through doors. For energy and utilities, as I was just mentioning, broadband might become increasingly important. We've seen a lot of sort of Green New Deal and energy efficiency policies at the state and local level. And clearly from what we've seen for the last few weeks, so much is driven at the state and local level. So I'm very curious to hear what's happening in Ohio. So maybe we can chat about that. And then of course, intermodal and logistics, so important, increasingly important to us right now, as we know that just getting what we need and last mile is really, really key. E-commerce has exploded over the last 5 or 10 years and will continue to do so. And then, the healthcare and science and technology. So this is the most recent brief I did, and we sent it out just before the pandemic, but some of the trends that we're tracking still hold true, which is quite surprising how the reality of it, because we've seen such a retailing of healthcare and such a move towards outpatient facilities. And a lot of hospitals have been closing or declining. And, that's something that I think we're all very aware of now when we think about how many beds and how many ICU facilities we have. So, whether or not that's a trend that's going to change is sort of to be determined. But one thing that won't change that is sort of the demographic drivers of the healthcare market, because our population is aging and we're going to have a much larger population of older folks who generally go to the doctors and visit healthcare facilities in the future. And then of course the rise of telehealth. So, which, once people get used to visiting their doctor through the internet, maybe that will become a much more common occurrence. So I encourage you guys to check out the briefs for a little bit more on all of these. And then the next slide, we're in the process at ACEC, and FMI is one of the partners that we do some of our research and some of our outlooks with, and sort of figuring out how this pandemic is going to affect the private markets and all markets. On Friday, we had Greg Powell with FMI give a webinar, and if you all weren't available to join it on Friday, you can access it and it's free. So most of our webinars that we're doing during this time are free. And I sort of put this slide in just to show, in FMI, it's very funny. They're very hesitant to even do an outlook on Friday because they felt like it was so soon and they really are still analyzing things. So, so they're still doing a lot of their sort of construction spending and by segment outlooks. They're still refining that, but they did this one chart where you can see, on the left side is sort of what the impact is going to be, and at the bottom is sort of how prolonged that impact will be by market sector. So, they're expecting that, on the top right, public safety, healthcare, and transportation, and maybe education will not be as significantly impacted as, say, the markets on our bottom right, which are lodging, amusement and recreation, religious. And really that sort of goes to everything that we're tracking and reading right now, is that markets where people have to come together, whether it's in a hotel, in a religious facility, amusement and recreation, that's a big market that covers stadiums and others, those are the sort of the markets ultimately that are going to have revenue lost and are not going to be designing and building new facilities, in the near future. So, so we will definitely be providing more of this kind of analysis in the next, month or two. And the next slide So the private industry briefs, we produce 8 issues a year. We do one for each submarket. They're free for members, and you can sign up electronically to have them emailed to you. And they sort of review the top clients, the market trends, other insights regarding business development, and as well as sort of hot geographic areas. So through our research, we found that, geography really makes a difference in the US with regards to what private clients are really, really significant in your area. For example, in Boston, the healthcare and the science and technology market is absolutely huge. In the southeastern part of the United States, with the Panama Canal opening, sort of that ports work, that industrial work, that railroad work has been really significant the last few years. So understanding that and sort of hearing more about Ohio, I think would be really interesting. What's also included in the briefs, which I didn't do a slide on, but can certainly provide you all more information, is the kind of government affairs and advocacy work that we do around the vertical and private markets. So I actually am based in BRE, but I'm partly in the advocacy group at ACEC as well. And we definitely are doing a lot beyond sort of transportation and water, when it comes to sort of the energy efficiency tax credits like 179D. We're also spending a lot of time advocating for the public activity bonds, which assist with vertical work with regards to education and healthcare and justice work. So there's a lot more on the advocacy side that we can talk about in the future, or I can send you guys more information on. And then the next slide is just sort of additional resources around the private market besides the briefs. We, starting in January 2019, developed a column in Engineering Inc. magazine called The Private Side. We're also doing, and I started this when the pandemic began, weekly updates because things are changing so quickly. So every Monday there's a post on the Last Word blog that just reviews some of the interesting data that's coming out. So for example, in yesterday's blog, I wrote about how in commercial real estate, they're really tracking rents right now, and how the May 1st rents, the rents that came in the first week in May, were really not that far off 2019. So to be determined if that will continue to be as stable as it is, or whether it will go down significantly. And then we're doing webinars, sort of not related to COVID-19 or the economy. We're doing a webinar on mass timber on June 3rd, which is obviously of great interest to folks that do, whether you do structural or MEP or geotech. That is something that, because of some significant code changes and some sustainability trends and some opening of some timber plants in the US, that is something that could really make a large difference, especially in buildings that are six stories and less. So if you're interested in that, I encourage you to join. And then, as I mentioned before, we're going to have our first roundtable discussion, which is free to sign up for, on May 21st, and I would love it if you all joined. So I'll be on the webinar, but it's going to be moderated by Michael Cooper, who is who's based in Michigan, and he does vertical work, a lot of education, healthcare, and other kinds of work. And so we just want to have like a very open discussion, which will help inform and help us hear from what people are hearing from their private clients right now. And then lastly, I just sort of had the conclusion slide on, I would love to work with you guys and to help you, and anything you have about what's unique to the Ohio market, or brainstorming, what your new forum might be able to do, what kind of programs or alliances maybe with other groups in Ohio, like ULI or NAOP or CREW, might be very interesting. So, and of course I can take questions as well. And that's it for my prepared remarks. So.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Erin. I would say from Ohio's standpoint, one of the resources I would suggest for you to review would be the Jobs Ohio website.
Okay.
They're one of the chief economic development arms for the state, and they have information on there that would provide information about the various industry sectors that they attempt to serve. And for them, it's advanced manufacturing, aerospace and aviation, automotive, energy and chemicals, financial services, healthcare, food and agribusiness, logistics and distribution, and technology. So they've split the pie in a few more pieces than you guys have, but there's a lot of continuity between
Right.
both.
Right. We actually did a webinar at National a couple of years ago, shortly after I joined, because I found that a lot of engineering firms, some of them are very savvy when it comes to partnering with their local economic development folks, and others are not quite aware as to the value of that. And when the Amazon, the RFP was going out and there were so many different states and localities competing, it sort of shined a light on that as a potential advantage. So I know when I was with Dewberry, you know, we would meet with, you know, Northern Virginia, who won the Amazon headquarters, as a very organized network of economic development folks. And we would meet with them to see if we could, you know, supply their maps, or, you know, or get in when a new business was looking in our region to find out if we could help, you know, find sites or work with them. So I definitely see the value of economic development as far as researching and understanding, but also potentially as a partner for a lot of engineering firms who want to better understand, you know, who's actually going to come in and build within the various localities.
Yeah, exactly. They're the people who are out there talking to the potential clients and know what's going on in the market, what folks are looking for, what kind of businesses are looking to invest in Ohio, and those sorts of things. I think in terms of economic impact, we've seen a lot of the manufacturing base and industrial base has shut down, at least partially or fully during this crisis. I think I saw an article that said Honda was planning to open up their automotive plants either this week or next week. So that's a positive sign. But there was also an article in the Dayton Business Journal today about just all the layoffs that have been occurring at manufacturing places and even healthcare facilities, because you know, they restricted the healthcare work to just the COVID-19 related stuff, put off all the other surgeries and treatments. So a ton of people are out of work. I know one of the things that we've been looking at is we've been trying to track projects that are delayed or canceled. We have had some impact within our firm that way, and maybe if some of the others on the call would care to join in and share their experiences. But I think a lot of our clients are going through some of the same things that we are, in that they've been working from home and they're now starting to reevaluate how they might come back to the office and work again. And they're trying to figure out what their new normal is just as much as we are.
Right.
And because of that, I think we all feel like there's going to be this delay in new projects and new work that comes to us over the next, 6 to 12 months or whatever the period is that you pick, just because they're not quite ready to go back to business yet.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of unknown.
Anybody else like to join in? How about Rich Miller? How are your clients dealing with this? You have to unmute.
Here. Thanks, Rich. Well, it's been up and down. A lot of our cities are doing, but we do a lot of public work as well as private work, or quasi-private work. The cities are doing what they have to do to maintain operations, but they're looking leeringly at any new projects because of funding, because of all the revenues that are being lost by lack of, capital budgets in Ohio, or lack of gas monies that are going to come in. So So we're really looking closely at that and what kind of funding. One area though that strangely enough for us has been doing well is we do a lot of work with electric co-ops and municipal utilities. And we've got several that are moving forward with their building projects, significant building projects. Greenville, North Carolina is not only finishing one of the projects they've asked us to design, build another one for them. We're working in Ohio with South Central Power, which is the largest electric co-op in Ohio, and they're building both a new headquarters and operations center and a branch, using CM at risk. And we're kind of designing some of it as it goes along. And in Pennsylvania, we've got another client that's moving forward with a pretty big headquarters project. So I think part of that is because, their facilities, they started in the 30s and 40s under the Department of Agriculture, but they built their facilities and then they haven't built any new ones since. I mean, they're in 50, 60-year-old buildings and they're falling apart. And because they were pretty flush with money before all this happened, and they're still getting revenues in most cases because people, I guess, are still paying the bills. And in most cases, they've got a revenue stream that's coming in, which a lot of private clients or quasi-private, the regular private clients don't. You were talking about companies like Honda not working. Well, it's not only the car lines that get hurt, it's all the people that distribute and build the parts for them that are going out of business as well because they have no place to sell to. So the ramifications are huge.
Right.
And one of the things I think we've seen, industry has spent the last 20 years moving to a just-in-time delivery system. And we've seen the weakness of that system when you have a big cataclysmic event, which is you start to run out of inventory rapidly and there's nowhere to get it from. So I think one of the potential outcomes of this is we might see, some of the supply chain facilities be spread out within North America again, hopefully within Ohio, since we're pretty well equipped from a transportation system to be able to handle logistical facilities. But I certainly think we may see some sort of movement toward having more of those facilities in our region. With the healthcare facilities, I know I listened to a webinar from some healthcare designers a week or so ago. One of the things that they really struggled with was having adequate triage facilities to handle all the patients that they were taking in, because they needed to be able to contain the virus and keep their workers safe. And so, we may be looking at new types of entry triage facilities at hospitals so that they can better handle those things. The other thing they mentioned was having flexible spaces, being able to take things like ambulatory care units and convert them into ICU units if they needed to in this form of a crisis. One of the people made the comment that since 9/11, they've basically been designing hospitals to care for these cataclysmic events with lots of injuries, lots of physical injuries. They haven't been designing facilities for pandemics. And so there may be a real change in the way that those kinds of facilities, look at their operations. Another weakness, they've moved toward more outpatient facilities, but the other thing they've found is that, during these pandemics, they haven't been able to do any of those other services. So maybe they'll try to dislocate them and move them farther away from each other so they can keep those areas in service while they're doing other things. I don't know. Your head spins trying to think about the possibilities of what might come out of this.
Right.
I think certainly large industrial facilities, they may take a harder look at entrance facilities. They're doing much more screening of employees and visitors as they come into the plants. Mostly before it was for security, but now they're going to have to take a look at health issues as well. So quite possibly we may be looking at those kinds of facilities. I don't know, but I think the big question for all of us is how long is this trough going to take, and how do we kind of hold things together and support these customers? Anybody else have any insights on a different client base? Maybe energy. I know we do some work for some petroleum companies. They've been very much hurt by the oil crisis, or the oil price war between Russia and the Saudis.
Right.
And had the virus not hit, they might be shut down anyway. So anyway, anybody else on the call, feel free to pipe in.
The one other thing I did want to say, and it's just a general statement though about the economy. I happen that my brother works in the financial industry, and I also have some friends. And the one thing they've said though is that they truly believe that this is a recession unlike any other, because this is a result of a health event as opposed to an economic event.
Yes.
Which provides obviously different challenges and different fears, but they truly believe that the recovery will be much faster than an economic event, as long as the vaccinations prove to be successful. Because once people, again, this is them talking, not me, but they believe that once people have a confidence level that the numbers are really getting reduced and there's a protection level, that the economy is just waiting to restart, as opposed to having failed because of the economic problem. So I have no idea. That's way out of my ken. So
that's what we've heard from. That's what the Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, and a lot of the economists that we follow at ACEC have said. Unlike the Great Recession, which was triggered by a housing crisis and a financial component, this is not a financial crisis. Now, if it could become a financial crisis if we find that, there's so many folks that don't have the revenue stream they need, or that banks, overlend, or that we drive ourselves into too big of a deficit or something like that. But, it's not, the cause is not a financial crisis. So from what everybody, seems to be saying is that right now, we are in a position where we can, we can lend our way out of it, and I think, we've done, for those of you that are following the ACEC surveys, we've been very surprised at how many of our members have, maybe not surprised, but, glad to hear that so many of our members have had luck with the PPP loans. And, when they do the industry classification, the Small Business Administration of who has gotten the PPP loans, the construction segment is the first segment, and the second segment, which is the one that AE firms fall into, is the professional services segment. We're the second largest group in that segment. So I think we are hopeful that this will be a short recession, and that we'll have the support that we need for firms to feel comfortable. I think, one thing that we have on our topic to discuss at the roundtable later this month on the 21st, that's unique for oftentimes for private clients, is they can be a bit harder to collect from, and, I've, done both public and private business development and work in my career. And, sometimes your developer clients or your private clients just don't pay when they don't have the money, or, they try to come up with an alternative arrangement. So that's not something that generally falls into the public problem, but I am curious to see if that will become a problem.
Sometimes faster than the public one.
Yeah. So we'll have to see if that becomes an issue, and how our firms are able to deal with sort of the account receivable issue, if that becomes an issue. The other thing I'd be curious to know if anyone is sort of the treatment of safety protocols. For those of you that do a lot of site work or doing site work right now, are you having a different experience with private clients than with public clients on that front?
I think for us, there's not a lot of difference. I think certain private clients are probably more strict,
Oh,
but on average, I think it's been treated more or less the same. I know in Ohio, ODOT designated construction as a mission critical function. And so construction on most ODOT projects continued, or even in some cases was probably accelerated just because of the reduced traffic. On the private side, our firm was working on an Amazon warehouse, and that project worked continuously the entire time. The only time they shut down, they did have a positive COVID test, and then they shut down that portion. They cordoned off that section of the site, closed it down for 3 days so they could go in and disinfect, and then brought people back in. So I think the construction industry has done a pretty good job of setting up protocols to try to minimize the damage, and has enabled most of the people to keep working.
Yeah, to that point, we've actually had a ban on corporate travel and really minimized inspections or things like that unless it's a critical situation. But what we've been able to do in some cases, again, because of technology, is we've had the people from the construction companies actually do almost FaceTime inspections for our people to actually show us live, using an iPad or the camera on an iPad or something like that, showing us live pictures of the site, and we've been able to address problems that way.
oh, interesting.
Not the best,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
of your limited field, but it does, again, it eliminates contact, minimizes contacts as much as possible, but still allows you real-time information.
Hey, good afternoon. Gene Baxendale here. Just curious what firms are thinking of as far as getting back to the office. We've been somewhat effective working remotely and don't appear to be interested in rushing back, not being the frontiersman and getting back to the office. Just curious what other people are doing.
Well, we're still on. Oh, go ahead, Rich.
I was going to say, I'm probably not the best person to answer this question because most of our people have worked continuously at our facility because we have a lot of laboratory operations. But we did make arrangements, when the schools were shut down, we made arrangements for folks who were impacted to be able to work from home, and most of them are still working from home, at least part or all of their schedule. And I think we're going to let those folks come back in on their own time. I know in talking to some other customers or some other clients, I know some of them were going to attempt to kind of do a soft open of their offices this week, maybe with a partial staff, changing schedules so they didn't have so many people at the same time. But I think it kind of comes down ultimately to what can you be comfortable with. We kept operating in our office building the entire time, and so we immediately put in some cleaning protocols and made disinfectants and sanitizing solutions available to folks. And when the governor changed the back to work orders last week, we actually worked for a month and a half without using masks in the office area, but now we are using masks when there's more than one person in an area. So.
Yeah, our offices have been closed, but we have had people go in on a single basis, and they have to go through the main entrance of the building, and their temperatures, where we rent space, the landlords have instituted procedures of, taking the temperature of a person. They got to go through the front entrance. They have to wear gloves and a mask. There's only one entrance. They can actually enter our offices. On the buildings that we own, again, people have gone in, but on limited basis when they either had to print something or do some type of production that just couldn't be done at home. But but of our almost 300 people, I'd say the better part of 290 are working at home continuously. Myself personally, I've been working at home since a week and a half before the official order to stay at home, just because we were starting to take precautions at that point.
Hey, I do know that the state of Ohio is encouraging working from home if you can. And I know agencies such as ODOT or OFCC are looking through June to be at home with their staff. So I think it's basically a kind of a decision on a business by business case at this point.
Yeah, the thing that bothers me the most, that concerns me the most, is the liability potential that's out there and the claims that could come out of the whole thing. I think the masks and that sort of thing, I think that's well understood and it's being used, but it's just that liability. If somebody contracts it, are they going to come back and sue you and claim that you didn't do enough and that sort of stuff? That's the thing that bothers me the most.
Yeah, and I would encourage, tomorrow we actually have a session with Oswald and Weston and Hurd on liability, and I believe it's at 10 a.m. That might be a good session for you to maybe get a little more insight on what you might want to do as a business.
Do you have any other questions for Aaron or anybody on the call?
Now, Rick, what do you want to share, if you're ready, any plans for the private sector forum? What are you all thinking are your next steps, and how might I be able to help?
Well, Beth can confirm this, but I know we have reached out to Jobs Ohio. And
Okay,
asked
good.
if they could provide some of their industry folks to just kind of give us an overview of what they're seeing in the marketplace. I think as we move forward, there may be other organizations that we can reach out to. There may be, maybe an association of healthcare
Great.
companies or engineers that maybe we can share notes with. Certainly, there are going to be people that chase the automotive sector, and there'll be people that have maybe some of the large commercial real estate developers. Maybe we can get in touch with them and find out, what they're seeing, what their view of the landscape is. So, I think, as I said going in, it's kind of tough to gather private industry information because so many of us guard it so closely.
Yeah.
But I think if we can try to focus on the general macro trends that are going on across the state, and just try to look at it from a more of an educational standpoint of what's going on in these industries, and how do we as an industry need to react to be able to deal with it. I think we can make these productive sessions for folks.
Yeah. I mean, I've found in my experience that putting clients on a panel will bring people there, whether they're their clients or not. So,
Exactly.
if you thematically said, okay, once a year, we're going to do a healthcare panel, and we're going to get, the largest hospital, the largest, retail and healthcare people, or, the largest ambulatory surgical, MOB people on a panel, and, and people will show up because they want to, they don't want to miss out. They don't want other people hearing something they're not hearing, even if they're not necessarily their clients. So
That's exactly right.
Doing that for whatever the most key industries are for you guys, whether even if, once a year you say, okay, that month is our healthcare panel, that month's our energy or utilities, and then we do a higher ed every other year or something like that. I found sometimes that's just getting 3 client folks on a panel sometimes is the best way to get it started. Yeah.
Yeah. And Beth, maybe one of the things we can do is have Holly send out a survey after our forum today and just kind of get some feedback from the people who had joined us to see, what kinds of sessions they would like to see going forward. So I'm sure Holly can set something up and we can get that out to you folks later today or tomorrow, and we would look forward to your viewpoints on what we're trying to do here. So
Richard, Beth, have we reached out to maybe some of the bigger CMs to be part of that panel, like a Turner or somebody like that? Because they'll have the pulse on, construction and healthcare and some of the other markets that are private. For example, Turner in Cincinnati is going full gangbusters on the FC Cincinnati Stadium, despite everything that's going on, and even with the fact that soccer is on hold and things.
I think that's an idea, Rich. We've not done anything other than kind of put this forum together at this point. But yeah,
this
it's a great idea. Absolutely.
kind of came together pretty rapidly over the past couple of weeks. So
Oh, good. It's
But,
hard to start something during this crazy work from home environment. So kudos to you guys for starting something new during this time.
Hey, Richard,
Yes.
Walter Jones at Metro Health up in Cleveland, the
Mhm.
hospital up there, he's usually very open to participating in forums like this. That might be somebody that you want to try to contact.
Great. Metro Health in the Cleveland area, you say?
They've got a huge construction project going on right now, but he seems to always be interested in participating in these sorts of things.
Well, great. I'm sure we'd all be interested in hearing his viewpoint. Well, once again, everybody, thank you for participating in our first forum. Hopefully, these will become a little bit more frequent and become a useful source of information for you. And with that, I wish everybody good health and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
You
Thank
too.
you,
Thank you.
guys.
Thanks, Aaron.
Bye.
Guys.